What's going on, everybody? We are back. We got episode number 44 of the Club and Sub podcast. As usual, we are brought to you by betonline.ag, really the best book for MMA, both with money lines and props. They open everything first, have the highest limits, and they probably have the quickest selection of props you'll get out there. If you want a 50% bonus on your first deposit up to $1,000, use the promo code CLUBSUB, and that is at betonline.ag. And yeah, so as usual, you got me, John Steiger MMA at MMA Fox, and at Luke at SWR_betting. As usual, I'd like you guys, if you're willing to, please drop a like and subscribe. We'd really appreciate it. Help us out a lot. But yeah, we're going to get into it. This card has turned into quite the Frankenstein card over the last several hours and several days. It's not great. I'm not a huge fan. Oh, we got C jumping in too. And we have at C Hansen 10 here as well. So yeah, but yeah, it's a weird card. I can't say I'm super excited for it. Even the main event, I'm kind of just like whatever. But we break it down nonetheless, and we start off with the fight I have a bet on. We got Marc-Andre Barriault taking on Abu Azaitar. Azaitar coming off a 2-year hiatus, and I like Barriault a lot here, to be honest. Look, he looked good his last fight against Oscar Piacotta. I'm not sure he made any actual improvements in that fight, so much as, the first 3 fights of his UFC career were against Andrew Sanchez, Jocko, and Jin Young Park. All of those guys I personally think are top 15 talents, and none are probably worse than top 25 in that division. And, he held his own in all 3 of those fights. All of those fights to some degree or another, especially the Sanchez and Jocko fights, were winnable for him, and he looked good. On the other side, you have Azaitar, who has been off for 2 years. He's also coming off a steroid suspension, just as Barriault is. He's 35, and the last time we saw him was looking pretty mediocre against 39-year-old Vitor Miranda, and before that, basically having 50-50 fights with 500 fighters in World Series of Fighting. I know the guy's allegedly got a great kickboxing background, but I don't really see it, to be completely honest. And so, yeah, it's just like a 35-year-old coming off a long layoff, off a steroid suspension, who didn't look very good to begin with, taking on a guy who's been consistently competitive with very good fighters. I don't really see how this line is close, to be honest. So, yeah, I took 2.5 units on Barriault. Luke, how about you?
Yeah, definitely not as strong of an opinion in terms of Barriault for me, but I do agree with him being favored in the fight. I guess in taping a Zaitar, there's a decent amount of footage on him, but I guess I don't fully know what to make of him as a fighter necessarily. And then also coming, back off of that suspension, the long layoff. I guess it's probably fair to assume that he's not going to be an exponentially better version of himself. It was good of Luke to bet. I almost did. I didn't do it. I don't think people would have been too happy with the side I would have been on there. But nonetheless, I just don't really know what to make of him. I think there are some comparisons you can make between both brothers. I would probably say a Zaitar, or the Abu, the bigger Zaitar, is probably a little less reckless in terms of entry, but they're both still very hook reliant in what they throw. He has went to the wrestling occasionally, which I guess is somewhat of the potential intrigue and potential upside for him here too. That's where we have seen Barriault struggle, but then once again, grinders and Andrew Sanchez, even Park has went to that even more than just in the their fight as well. And I can see the point with you too, John, that all those 3 losses are to at least solid fringe top 15 type of guys, and I believe he took a round off of all 3 of them, if I'm not being mistaken. The problem I've always had with Barriault is just kind of your brooding, go forward, one-dimensional guy. I think his game's pretty basic. He's pretty hittable, decent output. But I guess that's where my read on the fight's a little shaky. If the guys are just getting these big slugfests, I know Barriault's never been finished, but it looks like the Zaitar guy has some power too. Barriault, I know, has some TKO knockouts, but I'm just traditionally not a big Barriault guy. But if this should be in theory and on paper a winnable fight for him. But you kind of touched on it too, John. I've just kind of seen pretty much no evolution throughout the guy over the course of his career. He just kind of is what he is at this point. With that being said, that can still win him this fight. 100% it can. But I guess I'm not as bullish in the opinion to lay the money. But hindsight, it could look like a really solid bet.
Yeah, how about you?
Yeah, I just want to make a disclaimer. I've done very little amount of research for this card. Not super interested, but yeah, I think with Azatar and Barrio, the main thing is really just like, dude, anytime you're getting somebody who's been inactive, he's 35, he's coming off like a PED suspension, going against somebody who's been relatively active, having competitive fights in the UFC with, even, whatever you want to call Sanchez and Park and whatnot, whether they're fringe, top 25 guys, he's at least been active. So, on one hand, you have a guy who's done absolutely nothing for the past couple years, 35 years old, and you have a guy who's been active. So, like, if you're getting even money there, it's a plus EV bet all day, every single day. It's like, you really don't need to think about it too much. Like, if you're passing or you're betting Azatar, you're just not really, following a correct game plan in terms of EV betting. It's just like, there's no better scenario than the scenario you have right now in this case. Like, Azatar is not even like somebody who's like an elite guy, like a Dillashaw coming off 2 years. He's a fucking shitty kickboxer. So it's like, yeah, fade him at all costs at even money, like every single day of the week. And on top of that, MAB is durable as fuck. So it just doesn't make sense. Even if he loses, I think it's a good bet no matter what. So it's my take.
85% of Tapology is on thinks Zaitar is going to win as well. What could go wrong? What could go wrong?
Yeah. What could go
All right,
wrong?
I'm going to bet Barrio.
We move on to what potential fight of the night in the second fight here. We got Shane Young, OMalley. Luke and I are going to have some serious disagreement on this fight. Do you want me to go first? Or do you want to go first?
Yeah, take it away, John.
All right. So I haven't bet it yet, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to bet Shane Young here, to be honest. I guess I've waffled back and forth on Omar pretty hard, and I've come down on, look, I can't be too harsh on him for losing to Giga, even though I don't particularly love Giga. Giga is has a good stand-up. And obviously the Benitez win is an impressive win. What worries me with Omar is, first of all, I really didn't like the cardio or kind of the way he was reacting to shots at 45 when he fought Giga last time out. It just seemed different. Like in the Benitez fight at 55, he seemed like an absolute destroyer of worlds who could eat anything and just keep coming at you. And it didn't really seem like that against Giga, and he's here fighting at 45 again. Now, all of that said, look, he's obviously still dangerous with that being the case, but even so, the few times we've seen him get backed up in his career, which hasn't been often because the guy will force his way to the center, his output wanes pretty significantly and he can get hit a lot. And on the other side, you have Shane Young, a guy who, while uber hittable, is going to come forward basically nonstop. I actually think he's a more effective pressurer than Morales is. And look, he's very hittable. He could get KO'd here, but I trust his output more. We've seen his cardio hold up. The guy throws at an absolutely absurd pace. If you actually look at it, he actually attempts 19 strikes per minute at distance, I believe, compared to 10 for Morales. It's just, I trust if this gets out of the first round that Young is going to eventually take over this fight. And he's going to be, I think he's the crisper boxer, even if he is more hittable. Ultimately, I think it really comes down to, you look at the Klein fight, and I bet him against Klein, and he obviously got KO'd quickly, and that's a pretty substantial worry for me here. But it's like, what chance do you give Morales to finish him? Because if it's high, then obviously, this number is accurate. But I've seen Young take damage his whole career and against, some pretty good competition. He fought regionally, he fought that guy Guam Wang, who just disappeared off the face of the planet. But he hits hard. He fought Damian Brown regionally as well, and he fought Volkanovski, and he's never really had his chin checked the way he did in the Klein fight. Is that from an accumulation of damage? Maybe. But he's 27 years old, and so I assume he's getting better versus Morales, who's 35. I do think Young's going to have a speed advantage and has the crisper boxing, even if he is a bit more hittable. And so ultimately, like, I trust the cardio, I trust the pace. It's really a question of does he get finished? But, like, to me, I don't think I can get personally higher than like 30% for Morales finish. Maybe I'm underestimating it, but like I favor Young in a decision pretty significantly. So I think this fight should be around evens personally. So Young's my lean. Like I said, I haven't bet it yet. We're seeing Morales money come in, so I'm kind of waiting that out. So Luke, hit me with it.
Yeah, so I guess the first point I disagree with off the top is I actually do think Morales is faster. I personally don't think Shane Young is very fast. But to your point, though, I 100% concede the fact that Shane Young is a volume machine. He lands nearly double the output statistically than Morales does. Traditionally, I'm a big volume guy when it comes to stats because, if, the guy isn't finishing someone, it's largely a striking-based fight. Usually a guy going forward, throwing more, landing more is the guy who's winning fights more often than that. But I guess this is kind of where we part ways, is that I don't think Young is just going to be able to walk him down like he was against Rolando D and Austin Arnett, who I will also say are no longer in the UFC. And both guys historically are massive punching bags. And so even in doing so, both of those guys largely just stood in front of them and exchanged big bombs. Where I will concede the fact that Morales is a guy who will bite down on the mouthpiece and throw. But I guess that's where my slight disagreement is. That I don't think he's going to be able to just walk down Morales and just flurry him, for 15 minutes. I think Morales is really going to give it back to him. My big consideration is the fact of how hittable Shane Young is. I'm not going to sit there and say that the guy, isn't durable, because he has had a lot of fights. And, the last fight was the first fight he's got finished. You touched on, he's fought some guys who hit decently hard. But despite Morales going to decision in his last three, I also think Morales can really crack too. And guy kicks hard too. He's not just, traditional boxer per se. The guy, mixes it up. So I definitely think Morales, I wouldn't say is the side, because I will concede the point to you that I do think the line is actually slightly wide. I put Morales -150 myself. But I'm more so on the side that I do think Morales finds a finish.
Yeah, fair point. See, any thought here?
Yeah, I made it like 55-45. I think either way, Morales, Young, I think is, 55-45 one way or the other. I kind of just think it depends what you think Morales, knockout chances are. Even though, his win path isn't just a knockout, I just think Shane's pretty hittable. But at the same time, Shane's going to put on a pace, and going to put pressure on you. And Omar, I have questions about like how powerful the guy is. So that's kind of where I struggle with this fight is really how much of a percentage I kind of put on Omar knocking out Shane. Because at 45, he did look a little tired. A little depleted, and Shane's gonna bring it on him for 3 rounds. So yeah, I think anyway you kind of split the hairs, 55-45 one way or the other is probably right. Shane's the side at the current line. Don't mind like a Shane round 3 type prop, or just Shane decision's probably decent. I haven't checked what the odds are, but if you're getting like plus 250 plus 300 on Shane decision, that's not bad at all.
Yeah, I also think I mentioned it in our chat, but like I think the under could be decent as well. Like the ends ITD is plus 150 at the moment, and it's like you have 2 guys who basically rely on being front foot. Like it's possible they're just going to meet in the middle and just swing till someone dies. Like I said to you, Luke, what's one of my big concerns is Mark Morales just has a retard chin and isn't going to die. But yeah, we'll see. It's going to be a fun fight. It's probably, I wouldn't say it's my most anticipated, but it's probably the most entertaining on paper. But then we have another one here. Look at this. We're loading the prelims here in lieu of the main card. We have Modestas Spakowski is taking on Mikhail Osaga. Luke, I think you made a bet here. What do you got?
Yeah, so I played McCall at minus 150. In full transparency, it's a more of kind of like a ledge type fringe bet for me, just because there are some red flags right off the top with Oleksiejczuk in terms of the gas tank and potential grappling considerations. But what I will say is that even going back to his debut against Roundtree, where people might point to the fact that he got tired, one thing I will say is, one, he actually wrestled in that fight, had wrestling success in the first round and the third round. So when he got tired, he didn't just go life or death with Khalil. He went and took him down, took a clear path. So to me, that shows some amount of fight IQ. Then obviously smoked Volante and Antigulov. The OSP fight to me is just kind of like an anomalous type of fight, because I think in the aggregate, that type of scenario, I think Oleksiejczuk finishes OSP a decent chunk of the time. OSP just, tough battle-tested dude, didn't go out. Oleksiejczuk gassed. OSP did, OSP things, capitalized on shit, took him down and hit that Von Preux choke. And then the Crute fight, I mean, not too much to take away from there. Obviously, it's just back to the fact that, Oleksiejczuk can struggle on the ground. So ultimately, getting to why I made this bet is, one, Bukauskas isn't a guy who traditionally looks to wrestle. He's actually a guy who's being wrestled himself historically in probably like 5 or 6 fights, and he's more of like a comeback type of guy. So with that, I think both guys are going to give each other the kind of fight that they need to succeed. So I can see how some people might take that as, potential value on Bukauskas. Because, I mean, the guy, I think I still give him a little bit more credit than most people personally. His hands aren't bad. But I guess the big difference for me is I think Lord McCall is faster. He's kind of unorthodox. He's obviously not the biggest 205 in the world, but his movement patterns are weird. He'll throw from his hip, but he's accurate, high output, and he's pretty reliable to go forward. So I just don't overtly value the striking acumen of Bukauskas, and he's really also never fought anybody that's significantly, put it on him with hands outside of his last fight with Crute, who nobody really anticipated that's how that fight was going to go. Everybody thought Crute was going to just take him down and sub him, and then Crute comes out there and smokes him. I just think the pace that McCall brings is going to be enough to either find a finish or win a volume-based decision, because people can talk about his gas tank, but I also don't think Bukauskas is exactly Lance Armstrong either. So at minus 150, I think, the OSP fight doesn't happen. Crute fight doesn't happen. Lord McCall, everybody's back in love with him. The guy's probably 70% in this spot. So I like minus 150.
See, how about you?
I did not look into this.
Yeah, so I guess for me, like, it's funny because I would say the only thing that Bukauskas does have on McCall here is cardio. Like, it's the one thing that I think Bukauskas does have, good, is cardio. Like, you look at his CW fights, how many times was this guy getting dominated by grapplers for multiple rounds who then gassed out and he finished? Like, it happened 2 or 3 times, if I recall correctly, in Cage Warriors. And kind of ironically, like, I haven't bet the fight, full disclosure, but I actually think, if McCall wrestled him, he probably could. Like, I mean, it's possible Bukauskas made adjustments and has improved that, but I mean, he's hilariously bad defensive grappling the last we saw. But yeah, I mean, I agree with most of what you're saying, Luke. I actually think if McCall was to not bring such a frenetic pace and just be more relaxed, he probably would have the cardio. The guy just, at 205 pounds, when you go for it that hard, it's tough to sustain, and he always does go for it. But I do think he's the cleaner striker. I think he's pretty much better everywhere. But the cardio cliff in the OSP fight, it's enough for me to stay away, at least for now. But yeah, I mean, I'd like to see him bounce back. I think he has good tools, and I can't see Bukauskas doing to him what Crute did. So yeah, I don't hate the stab. But we move on, and I think you have another play here. We got Jared Gooden making his second fight in the UFC, taking on the bad Nurmagomedov. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm on the bad Nurmagomedov here, but I played him by a decision personally. The line doesn't really make much sense to me that, the guy's, 70% on the money line, but like, roughly 45-40% by the decision line. Because if you really run back through his rap sheet, the guy's not a finishing machine. But what I will say is just from a general perspective, I'm not the biggest fan of Abu Bakr. I think of that whole Dagestani contingent. He's probably a little lower on the totem pole. So really what the win condition of Gooden here is obviously to find a knockout. If you do go back and watch Gooden's fight with Michael Graves, you can compare Michael Graves, Abu Bakr, and we can get into that conversation. But it was concerning. That was the first guy that really ever really aggressively wrestled him, and he struggled. And it really wasn't that long ago as well. And that's something that Abu Bakr's pretty consistent to bring. But I guess my slight, concern with the bet, there have been times where he will stand in exchange for extended minutes. That's actually what got him club and subbed in one of his losses as well, as I think. But I do think from a striking perspective, if you watch like the trajectory of the guy, I do think his striking has gotten better. I still think it's, moderately green, a little, maybe probably around average subpar, but like, I do think it's a component of his game that he's gotten better at, but I just don't think he's going to sit there and stand and trade with Gooden because he's, like I said, he will consistently wrestle. I think that's his path. I know Gooden is a brown belt in jiu-jitsu, I believe, but he hasn't been an overt submission threat, especially off of his back, especially against a grinding base guy. And we, have in somewhat decent confidence that Gooden isn't going to try to sit there and play from his back. And his primary game plan is to get up and knock this guy out. So yeah, it's not a play like I'm uber confident in. It's more so just a discrepancy between the money line and the decision line for the most likely outcome of the fight on a grinding based Russian over a guy who's struggled with some grinding before. So I like it.
See, how about you?
Gooden's going to insta tap because he's Dan's boy. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, I don't have a bet here. I guess it's weird because I bet Joban against Gooden like pretty confidently, to be honest. And that fight ended up being a complete fucking sweat, at which I did not expect at all. I mean, look, I knew Gooden could knock him out. I didn't think that Gooden had a chance to win on minutes, which he did for periods in that fight, which actually impressed me. It seemed like he made some real improvements. But with that said, kind of to your point, the guys who have grappled Gooden, they've had success doing it. It's possible he's made improvements. In fact, I'd say it's likely he's made grappling improvements, both in terms of his takedown defense and get-ups. The question is really, to what degree? Because there's improvements where, you're getting up against poor wrestlers, and then there's improvements when you're getting up against good wrestlers. I think he'll probably get up a few times throughout this fight, at least early. The question is really, can he capitalize and knock Abu Bakr out enough to cover that line? I was thinking of playing him, but it's just like the more I think about it, maybe Abu Bakr strikes them, but I kind of feel like the first time he gets tapped hard, it's going to be right back to diving on legs. And so it's like hard for me to imagine Gooden winning a decision unless he's leveled up massively. And in terms of striking, it's like, his line's plus 185 to get to a bettable place. You have to think it's like 40-45%, and I just can't quite get there. I don't hate the play, Luke. I'm a little nervous because I really just don't like, Abu Bakr's general sit and guard game. Like, that freaks me out with wrestlers all the time. And like, he may say he's going to get up and knock him out, but the next thing you know, he's got a triangle wrapped around him. And like, look, I know David Zawada's got an okay guard, but getting tapped from bottom by David Zawada is really disturbing. But I do agree. I do think the most likely outcome here is going to be Abu Bakr by decision. So yeah, it's a pass for me. But we move on, and luckily for all of you guys, I have foresight and can see the future, and taped Fabio Charant 2 weeks ago. Actually, I taped him because he was fighting Myron Dennis at LFA a couple weeks back. So yeah, I actually, I have some familiarity with him. He just stepped in to fight Alonzo Menafield. I think the current line we have on Menafield is Menafield minus 275. That's probably heading to 300 or 400. To be honest, it's kind of funny because I was thinking of playing Menifield when he was fighting Knight because, I just don't rate William Knight at all. And at even money, Menifield, who has UFC wins, seemed like it'd be a good spot. I don't really understand why he's getting steamed here, to be honest. Like, I think he's the better fighter. Look, the guy's fought real competition as opposed to Charant, who's, beating Dennis is nice, and he did it over 5 rounds, which is impressive. And other than that, got killed by a flying knee by Lexa Kamer and hasn't fought anybody else. But that said, Charant's a good athlete. He's probably an athletic equal of Menifield. He's a decent boxer and he's a decent grappler. His problem is low volume. And it's like, he's got cardio and he can go 5 rounds. So it's like if Menifield does Menifield things and doesn't get him out of there in round 1, you're going to be sweating a minus 275 Menifield better parlay. Like, I don't really, I described him to Luke earlier today as a good athlete who's just not good at things. And that's kind of where I come down on him. Like, he is a good athlete. He might be Menifield's athletic equal. He's just really young. They're probably making a mistake bringing him to the UFC now. But I mean, if Menifield doesn't take his head off early, this is going to be a close fight. And so, I don't really want to play Fabio Charant, but if he starts creeping into that 300, 350 fight, it's going to be interesting. I mean, Luke, do you have any opinion here?
I honestly know nothing about the Charant guy, so I'm going to pass this one over. I'm assuming C probably. And you got something to say on this one, C?
I did tape him when he was fighting LFA a couple weeks ago. I think the athletic things, I don't know that he necessarily matches Menifield 100%, but he's pretty close. Even the Kamor fight, he was kind of competitive with Kamor. I mean, he actually had Kamor somewhat hurt prior to that flying knee. And Menifield completely fucking, shit his pants for his OSP. And then he gassed really bad versus Devin Clark. So if there's ever a time to lay minus 400, I guess it's on Menifield here. I don't understand why.
Yeah, and it's like, the other thing is, like, what does Menifield always does? He dives into the clinch for no apparent reason, and Charant can actually grapple a bit, and I don't think that's a position he's going to consistently win. So it's like, I don't want to. What was that say?
Menifield's just like not a guy that like you really ever want to lay like minus 300 on. Like, you're pretty like limited to him. Like, he needs like a knockout. I mean, even like winning minutes the later this fight goes. Charant has better cardio. I mean, he just went 5 rounds with what's his face.
Dennis, yeah.
Well, that's the one thing about Menifield that you can say. I mean, the guy, there's no evidence out there that he can win minutes. The furthest fight he's went in a W is a couple minutes into the 2nd round. Like, there's just no evidence that he can win minutes.
And it's like, I remember couple months back hearing, I think it was Gugave said that, Craig was like winning minutes against Menifield. And I was like, is that true? It's not how I remember it. Then rewatching it, it's like, yeah, Paul Craig was actually winning the stand-up in Menifield before he pulled guard for the 2nd time and died. It's just like Menifield, outside of good athleticism and good defensive grappling, just doesn't really do anything. Like, that's it. So it's like, I don't know. I don't really want to have money on Fabio Charant, but if people keep steaming it, I might. I might just throw the Alonzo fade one more time. So
if Fabio's like plus 300,
what did you say? You're hitting it?
If he's plus 300 by the time, in a couple, 3 days, I'm in. If it hits plus 300, I'm in for sure.
All right, I can get behind that. Luke, can you get behind that on principle here?
I mean, yeah. I mean, when you're talking, I said it last week with Yaya and Rodriguez. I looked like a dumbass in that regard, but largely a guy, one win condition. What happens when the win condition isn't met? Should that guy, be 70, 75%? It's like, yeah, it looks great when the win condition is met, but if it doesn't, so I always respect those stabs, man.
Yeah, for sure. And we move on, and I have a bet here. We got Jamie Malarkey taking on the Death Star, best nickname in MMA, comma worthy. Yeah, I bet Jamie Malarkey, to be honest. I had 2 units plus 130. I don't think he should be an underdog. I shouldn't say I don't know why. There is an athletic gap here, a pretty significant one, and a pretty substantial striking gap. I guess for me, like when I watch Worthy, there's a couple things, in particular in the Pena fight. You hadn't seen him in his regional footage get grounded a lot. And then you saw it against Pena, and like I heard people talking about how he swept Pena twice. It's like, no, Pena made an error in his positional grappling, and he rolled into his guard. He didn't sweep him. He basically gave up mount like it was nothing. I mean, he looked pretty clueless on his back in that fight. What I will give him credit for is he seems to have a decent, first level of takedown defense and sprawl. But if you wrap your hands around him and all, he gets put to the mat, and he gives up position very, very easily. On top of that, he's hilariously fragile. The guy's been knocked out, I believe, 7 times now. He just doesn't take shots very well at all. And so he's the superior striker here. I'd agree with that. And like, if it stays at range, he's going to probably pick Malarkey apart. But I don't think he has the best distance management. Like, you basically saw a Zaitar just rush him and knock him out. And then Malarkey, for as unathletic as he seems, the guy on the feet, number one, will go for it. The guy's willing to bite down to the mouthpiece, go forward and throw. And, we saw him hurt Brad Riddell in his first fight in the UFC. He's got a bunch of KOs regionally. So he's got, relatively heavy hands, certainly enough that he could catch Worthy in an exchange and finish him. Like, that wouldn't shock me. And then on top of that, he's attempting nearly a takedown a minute, Malarkey. And so, maybe he'll struggle early in this fight to get him, but I really think at some point he's going to get them. And when they come, Malarkey can do the same thing as Pena and be way too aggressive in passing. And, maybe he ends up on bottom doing that. But I think he's going to get dominant positions here when he hits takedowns a few times in this fight. And we'll have the opportunity to either ride him out or finish him from top position. I just think seeing what we've seen from Worthy in the defensive grappling, combined with his fragility, combined with his general willingness to grapple, and I have to favor Malarkey here. I get all the reasons you wouldn't want to be on him, but a guy who will take the path of least resistance against a guy who's susceptible to grappling, give me the plus money. Luke, how about you?
Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion on this one. I guess if I was to play it, I'd actually probably look to the over 1.5, just because I think Malarkey's like crazy durable. And I guess the one thing, I don't actually hate Worthy as much as most people do, but what I will say is, like, if you go back and watch all of those old KOs and then you watch like the big, run and stretch that he went on, even pre-UFC, he hasn't really been pushed very much. And that's at least one thing that Malarkey's willing to do, is whether that's even in the striking or the grappling, he's just reliant to do shit, as we like to say on this podcast. So yeah, that's why I'm kind of with you, where I think the value is on Malarkey as well. So looks like we're saying
Joe Biden?
No, doesn't have anything to do with Joe Biden, huh?
Back up mute.
All right. So I don't really have a strong opinion here. I think you got a pretty decent number on Malarkey, but I'm still not, the biggest fan of either guy in terms of investing my money. So if I was to play it, I still might do it. I think the over 1.5 might have some value.
Yeah. See, ask him Malarkey or Worthy.
Here we go.
See, ask him if he likes Malarkey or Worthy.
What's up, boys, huh?
Oh, that would have been the best soundbite of this podcast.
What do you want me to ask him?
We wanted to know if the cashier likes Malarkey or Worthy.
Oh, fuck. He was asking if immigration was going to get him for being on the podcast.
Do you like Malarkey or Worthy?
I like that over 1.5. I got minus like 125. So that's I think Malarkey's at plus money, though. Worthy kind of sucks.
Yeah, fair. If you could actually, I actually think an interesting way to play this, if you have a book that offers not props, playing not Malarkey ITD is minus, or not Worthy ITD is minus 175, and like, I don't think Worthy's hands are as heavy as the KOs that he has. Malarkey can get hit, but I don't know, man. I don't think Worthy's over 30% for a finish here, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, I'm just riding with Malarkey. Just an idea to toss out there. And now we move on to a fight I think we have broken down before. We have Jillian the Savage Robertson taking on Miranda Maverick. Jillian Robertson, friend of the podcast, and someone who I've continued to try to talk myself into betting in this spot, but to be honest, without the Tyler Santos fight, I would have bet her. That fight deeply, deeply concerns me just because I actually think she's a better grappler than Santos, but you just kind of saw a massive physical strength disparity get her put on bottom and just out-muscled in that fight. And it's kind of my fear here. Like, I think there's a chance that Jillian looks hindsight 70, 75% if she can hit takedowns and get on top. But Maverick's not a bad grappler, and she is a big, strong girl. And so it's like, even though I think there's a decent chance Robertson's serious value, there's also, it's like one of those things where my confidence interval is so low because if it turns out Maverick's made those improvements on bottom at 23, or she can just hold up with her in the clinch, she might just dominate this fight as well. Like, I could see either girl being a big favorite. So it's a pass for me. I'm rooting for Jillian. I think if you're going to bet aside, she is definitely the way to go here. But I just don't have enough confidence in her being able to dominate the grappling. Luke, how about you?
Yeah, no bet for me either. From a picking perspective, I'm more on the Maverick side. I guess my two main points are one, you touched on it too, John. I think the physicality difference I think is evident between the two. I know people want to go back to some of the Maverick fights in Invicta where she's gotten stuck on bottom a few times, but I do think there have been improvements made there. And then with Jillian, we talk about it all the time that, she's kind of a one-trick pony, at least in the grappling aspect. And I know I'm probably going to get lit on fire for saying this on the pod. I don't think her wrestling is very good, personally. Her metrics are very good. They are. But I also don't think, the girls that she's out wrestling are, overtly credentialed in general. She's very good on top. I'll give her that. Obviously, she's a very good grappler, but from like a pure wrestling standpoint, I don't think her wrestling is that good. And I think that's where Maverick, at least in my opinion, is going to be able to have first level takedown defense to stuff that. And I also think Maverick's hands have gotten better over the years. They're definitely still not great by any means, but I do think it's, if you watch the trajectory of her career, I think you can acknowledge some improvements made in the stand-up from Miranda Maverick, especially in that Joe Jua fight. She looked better than she ever has in terms of her stand-up going forward. Say what you want, Joe Jua. Don't talk shit about my girl, Joe Jua. Love me some Joe Jua. But no, yeah, it's kind of more of a dog or pass situation from a betting perspective, but I kind of would just like to sit back as a bettor and take in where Maverick is, because I think this fight is going to answer a lot of questions.
Yeah, good measuring stick. See, any opinion here?
Yeah, I played, I don't know what it is this time, but I played Maverick by knockout the first time. I think I got plus like 700, mostly because I think if Maverick's having success, a knockouts looks pretty good price-wise, just because Jillian reacts pretty shitty anytime she's getting hit. So if it's plus 700, I'll take a stab. But I don't really have too much interest on betting like a side.
Yeah, fair. And we move on to the return of the Sugar Show from no apparent injury, where he got carted out on a stretcher, to fight Tomas Almeida here, also turning around off a loss to Jonathan Martinez. See, any player?
Yeah, I played ends by knockout at minus 125. I think that's the best. It's better than fight doesn't go to decision, and I prefer it to the under. So yeah, minus 125. Both guys pretty much, in my opinion, OMalley's fragile. Don't care what anybody says. He's fragile, man. He went down like fucking glass versus Cheeto. I just have a feeling that guy's fucking weak. Come on, the guy's been saying that he's won for fucking like 8 months. His ankle didn't even break. He was saying how his ankle broke and all this shit, dude. He just got hit in the calf really fucking hard, and he's mentally weak and got fucking ice. He's a quitter. He's a pussy. And Almeida, at the same time, that guy is built of fucking glass. So ends by knockout, minus 125. Nice number. Almeida, definitely the side. I think anyone playing Sugar fucking whatever the fuck they call that guy these days, minus 300. You might as well throw fucking Menfield in those parlays, dude. What could go wrong?
Yeah, I'm with C pretty much 100. Well, I didn't bet the ends by KO. I've been like debating betting Almeida, but like I think C mentioning how he's glass is fairly well. It's accurate, but also like he has a bad tendency to kind of admire his work in the pocket and just get hit flush. Like he pretty much lost the Jonathan Martinez fight because after every time he'd throw a combination, he'd sit there and then just get clipped hard. Like it happened 4 or 5 times that probably swung otherwise close rounds. And I kind of think if O'Malley's hitting him with those counter twos, he's probably going to go to sleep. But yeah, I agree that O'Malley is pretty fragile. At this point, it's like it's happened twice now where his leg's been badly compromised from kicks. We've seen him also on top of that show cardio issues in the past. And so it's like I think O'Malley as a pure striker is elite. I think it's hard to argue that his metrics are elite. He's done everything you want him to do against low-level comp. But we've just seen some really bad signs. And Almeida, the thing you have to say for him is, number one, he'll bite the mouthpiece and go for it. Number two, he will kick the legs. Like, we don't – look, I don't know if you've ever called someone's legs chinny, but, like, maybe we'll get there with Sean O'Malley after this fight. I don't know. I do think the line is too wide, though. It's like we keep getting these 75% implied odds for O'Malley, and it's like, I guess against Eddie Wineland, who's 35, 36, that's fine. Now you're fighting Tomas Almeida, who's 29 and hits really hard and who has fought and had close fights with some very, very good fighters. It's getting a little crazy, to be honest with you. I lean Almeida. I don't really want to take the stab because I think he's going to get knocked out. I may play that ends in KO too. But, yeah, I don't – again, like the O'Malley hype, it's like I don't – maybe this is the time to fade him. I don't know. Luke, what do you think?
Yeah, I guess I want to say I'm more so on the O'Malley side than you guys are, because obviously you guys are probably thinking O'Malley knocks him out too. But like from just a general perspective, nothing would make me more happy than to see Thomas Almeida come in here and get a W. Like I know we were kind of talking him up, in the Martinez fight. I know me and John slightly disagree on that fight. I personally thought he looked a little raw. How much of that is to be attributed to the fact that he's coming off a long layoff? I don't know. Maybe that was just, from a narrative perspective, at least, to get the rust off, and he comes in here and looks like old school Thomas Almeida. And if that's the case, I do think the line is wide. Because even Almeida largely being, one-dimensional in the boxing and even mixing in leg kicks, he's good. He's good at it, man. He's high volume, and he seems to find guys' chins and has power. Like, he's just one of these guys that I think so many people have just forgot about. The guy was pegged to be a future world champion at one point. Like you said, John, dude had competitive fights, with some elite level guys. So, but with all that being said, dude's crazy hittable. O'Malley throws rockets down the pipe. If he just tries to bull a guy like O'Malley, I just don't think that's how you beat a guy like O'Malley. So depending on Almeida approach, the fight could play a little closer than odds indicate, but I guess I'm more so with see that if you are to play this type of fight, I think violence in some capacity is the way to go.
Yeah, fair. So somehow, as we move to the co-main, Tomas Almeida versus Sean O'Malley and Shane Young versus Omar Morales were not enough to get placed above Tyron Woodley and Vicente Luque. I don't know how long we're going to do this song and dance with Tyron Woodley fights, but C, you want to take this away? You want me to go? Okay. He's got all right. Yeah, so I think this – look, I get it. Everybody's saying Tyron's washed, and maybe he is washed, but also it's like I think everybody who's kind of like sharp kind of knew for a while that Woodley was a bit of a fraud, to be honest. He always had, the issues we saw in his last 3 fights were issues he had when he was champion. They were issues he had before he was champion. The guy always backs up to the fence. He's always low volume. He's basically spent an entire career off a big counter right hand that could knock people out and that elite power that he has scaring people from throwing volume. So he had a bunch of close, low volume fights and a bunch of knockouts. That's how he became champion. That's how he defended his title. The truth of the matter is, what changed is the guys that he was fighting all of a sudden turned into guys who played the perfect game plan. Usman, Colby, Burns, all of them played what you have to do, the all the way in game or the all the way out game. You can't sit at the mid-range with Woodley because he hits too hard. Now, maybe the power is going away. That's possible. I fully acknowledge that. He's 39 years old. But he's fighting somebody, Vicente Luque, who's a clear step down in competition here from those guys. On top of that, if this was 3 fights ago, I might have said, maybe Luque will play the all the way in, all the way out game. But then we saw him just decide he wanted to go to war with Nico Price. We saw him do the same thing with Mike Perry. It's Brian Barberena. It's every fight with Luque, the guy goes to war. And we're past the point now where it's like, maybe Luque will do the smart thing. No, he's not going to do the smart thing. We've talked about it on this podcast before. He's definitively going to go in there and trade bombs until someone drops. And so it's like, look, if Woodley's power is just gone, yeah, he's going to lose this fight because he probably can't keep up on volume, and Luque is going to take it to him. But personally, I get everybody thinks Luque can't be stopped, except he's been hurt by Price. He's been hurt and dropped by Barberena. He was hurt by Thompson. He's been getting hurt every fight these days, just about. And now he's fighting somebody who hits harder than all of those guys, who basically has literally made a career in a championship run off knocking guys out. The opportunities are going to be there. A guy who specializes in getting hit in the face, taking on a guy with elite power, should not be almost minus 300. That's just the reality of the situation. That said, I haven't bet Woodley's money line. What I did bet, for some reason, Woodley decisions plus 300 and KO is plus 600. I don't really understand how that works, but I played Woodley by KO plus 625. I really think, if he wins, I think if it goes to a decision, his only real path is to drop Luque a couple times, which could happen, but is it more than a 10% outcome? Probably not. And so I think if he wins, it's going to be by that. And then on top of that, I also took a unit shot on Eds inside the distance at plus 132. Not even really a soft hedge, just kind of unless Luque fundamentally changed his game from his entire career, he's going to go forward and throw in the pocket. We've seen Woodley finish before. He's getting older. And basically, I just think there's going to be a lot of really heavy exchanges. Maybe it makes it 15, but I kind of think it's the perfect fight to target something like that. And I think we're getting plus money because there's a perception that both guys are uber durable, except both guys have been getting hurt in just about every fight these days. So those are my thoughts. Luke, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely make a solid argument for Woodley in that capacity. But I guess I'm also more so on the Luque side. Would I lay, minus 300 or whatever it is on Luque? No. Would I play him around minus 200? To be honest, I probably would. I think, a guy who's going to go for it has that pressure boxing based game against a guy in Woodley who just doesn't do anything. So obviously Luque is hittable. He's been hurt before. Woodley knocks a ton of guys out. But I guess there's 2 reasons why I'm saying this. One, now I've heard some things that it's like now that it's a 15-minute fight that it's better for Tyron Woodley. I don't really understand that, to be honest, because I mean, once again, to your point, John, I guess if he's winning a decision, it's probably based on well, I guess from that perspective, if you're looking at it based on knockdowns, then sure. I guess then he could potentially squeak 2 rounds in that capacity. But I guess from how I'm looking at it, his win condition to win a decision is so limited. So by actually taking 25 minutes down to 15, that's taking 10 minutes off of him having potential knockout upside, which is largely what his win condition is. So with that, yeah, I guess it's more so a matter of fact if does Luque, stay conscious. But I've just been a Luque homer ever since watching him on Tough, like back in 2015. And even back then, I said this guy's going to be a future world champion, extremely well-rounded. But yes, there have been a lot of fights where, yes, he has been, a significantly sized favorite and people are sweating. Like you talked about. Honestly, he probably would have lost the Barberena fight if he didn't land the big punch. There were some hairy moments against Krantz. Like you said, even against Perry, went life or death. Price, I get that. But my thing is, is this the type of fight that just brings a dog fight out of Woodley? Because I almost feel like Luque is going to force him to fight or he's going to fold. But with that, I'm not necessarily convinced, even if Luque like puts it on him, that like Woodley's going to rise to the occasion now necessarily. I mean, even Burns still did outstrike him like almost like 4x, maybe not the exact same pressure based game, but it seems like Woodley's this is completely narrative based, but it largely seems like he's pretty uninterested in his career at this point. Like he just, when adversity came, he's kind of just been like, whatever, off night. I don't know. To me, he's just a really hard guy to invest in at this point.
Yeah, fair. See, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I've unsuccessfully tried to fucking figure out when Luque is going to get knocked out, and it just doesn't really happening, even though like I know it's going to happen, or at least in my mind it should have happened like multiple times, but that's besides the point. Luque, I think Luque is okay. I played him versus Brown. I do think, he's a technical striker offensively, but I don't, he has massive defensive holes just because of the way he approaches, various fights. He's down to just brawl and kind of draw that fight out of you. And with Woodley, I've kind of unsuccessfully bet on Woodley versus Burns because I thought he was going to just kind of draw out a counter and whatever. It didn't happen. Woodley kind of just seems gun shy. I don't even know if he's willing to throw his hands. I don't know if he's just mentally completely fucking dazed here. Like his best path is pretty much versus any of these guys at this stage. I mean, he's 39. Bite the mouthpiece, swing as hard as you can, and fucking hope somebody drops and it's not you. And if there's anyone who's going to draw that out of him, it's Luque. Otherwise, I mean, he's going to I don't even see a scenario where he doesn't. Somebody's falling. I mean, it wouldn't make any sense. Luque, the way Luque fights, if Tyrone just sits there and shells up against the fence and does absolutely nothing, he's just going out cold. And on the flip side, if Luque does draw out some type of hands from Woodley, Woodley probably still has the power to ice you. So, I think the Woodley knockout plus 600, it's a good number. I have a little bit of Woodley knockout, but I'm not like uber confident in Woodley just because, I don't know, the guy's fucking all over the place mentally. If you just came out after all these fights and just said, I suck ass nowadays, I need to bite the mouthpiece, I'd feel a lot better. Instead, he's talking about fucking kumbaya bullshit all the time. Fucking Jesus Christ. Every time the guy hops on the mic, I should have, I'm fucking on paper, I'm better than all these guys. I'm like, what the fuck paper are you reading, dude? Jesus Christ. Fucking guy. Yeah, but Woodley also probably has the one thing going for him that he probably is pretty close to being broke, and he probably needs to win to fucking get another fight. So at least maybe he's motivated by not going homeless. I don't know.
Yeah, rap album ain't doing it for you, see?
I mean, I think he talked about how he had like 8 cars and he leased all of them, and then he fucking wasn't the champion and he wasn't getting pay-per-view points, and he was confused why he wasn't like getting millions of dollars anymore.
It's true. Yeah, so now he's in movies getting his dick bit off. Did you guys see that? I'm not going to get too far into it, but go. That's what he's famous for.
Save that for the group chat.
Yeah, I'll just leave it in there. But yeah, go look that up on Twitter, guys. That's what he's famous for these days. We move on to, I don't know. Is it fun? Is this a fun main event? I don't really know. We've seen it before. Miocic and Ngannou. I think we're all going to have the same opinion, but see, take it away.
I buy every pay-per-view pretty much. I mean, I never stream anything. I buy them all. I'm actually not buying this. I'm probably not. Honestly, I'm going to watch the fucking prelims and then be done with this whole fucking card. But yeah, I mean, it's like pretty obvious. Stipe's got Francis covered everywhere, but Francis has something that fucking you can't even put a number on, dude. The guy's power is just outrageous. I see a lot of people playing like the round one Francis, which is fine, but like, dude, he's got the power where just like any mistake you make and he touches your chin, you could go out. So it's like, I don't even know that, like, if you played round one Francis and whatever the fuck else you want on Stipe's side, that you're getting anything that's like plus EV. I mean, it's like, you could have those Derek Lewis situations where the guy just fucking, all you need is that half a second. So it's like, why bother? I mean, I think the Stipe decision number is pretty good, but I mean, at the same time, like, Stipe could just wrestle fucking finish him if he really wanted to, but I have no strong fucking opinion. Stipe is probably the side, yet Francis probably knocks him out fucking in the first round. It looks like it happens 97% of the time. Like, I don't know what you do if he just storms at you. I mean, the big fucking unfair dude rushing at you who hits like fucking Mike Tyson, you're kind of just fucked.
Yeah. I think MMA by the numbers say this. He's the first guy in UFC history to KO 4 guys in round one, 4 times in 4 straight fights twice. It's really, it's so frustrating because, like, I see people talk about how Ngannou's made improvements, and it's like, no, he hasn't fucking made improvements. Like, what are you talking about? He's made no improvements at all, but it doesn't matter. Like, it just doesn't matter at all. And it's like, I'm halfway torn kind of because of what you just said, C. It's like, I think Ngannou's, on one hand, you could argue his best chance to win is to just go full rabies and try to kill Stipe in round one. But I sort of think if he does that, Stipe can do exactly what he did in the first fight. I mean, it might not work, but, you know, just change levels when he gets close and just kind of get his crack shoes on and run from him for 5 minutes. But, like, to your point, if it does turn into a Lewis-type staring contest, it's like Stipe's defense has gotten a lot worse over the last 2 years. You know, I was talking with Luke about this before we went on the pod, but, like, you look at the last 2 Cormier fights, especially before he hurt Cormier in the second fight, he was getting hit clean a lot with shots that probably put him out against Francis. And so it's like, if Francis is more tentative or patient, you know, the shot's probably going to come at some point, or it will be there to hit him. You know, I think if he lets Stipe lead, he's going to lose minutes, but, you know, he still has that power. And so ultimately, like, I guess, you know, I agree. I guess Stipe is the side. Like, look, I do think doing the exact same thing that happened in the first fight is very, very live. You know, those bull rushes Francis did, that bull rush into Jairzinho, we saw him try to do that to Stipe, and Stipe changed levels every time it happened. You know, I think that's going to be there. Even if he doesn't take him down, I think just shove him into the clinch. But it's just like, how many, like, if I bet Stipe Miocic here and he gets nuked 90 seconds in, I'm going to be like, why did I actually light money that I worked to make on fire here? Like, why did I bet on this when I knew this could happen? And conversely, like, if I were to bet Francis and then he gets 50-45'd again, I'd be like, you schmuck, you saw this happen once already. Like, what are you doing? So yeah, it's a pass. I'm rooting for Stipe because all the people that are like, oh, Francis is this killer, he's made improvements, so I can yell about how stupid and wrong they were. But yeah, it's no bet for me. Luke, how about you?
Yeah, so you guys pretty much hit it on the head for me. So only 2 points. I did put out a tweet earlier today where I said, and I quote, it's one of those fights where if your guy wins, it looks like tremendous value. If your guy loses, you're like, why the fuck did I bet this fight? And so we've pretty much already, you know, touched on that. Like, one thing I will say from a money line perspective, yes, it's Stipe, the better all-around fighter, a guy who can win minutes, better gas. If you're going to bet the money line, you have to be betting Stipe. I'm not saying you should. I'm saying if you are, because there's nothing out there to suggest that Ngannou can win a 25-minute fight. There just isn't. But conversely, if you are to play Ngannou, I think even though the discrepancy between the money line and the KO line, you can go to, you know, round props if you want. I mean, that discrepancy is still only about 20 cents, but honestly, it's a scenario where I would say take the 20 cents and play the KO and not the money line. Once again, there's nothing out there to suggest that Francis Ngannou can beat Stipe over the course of a 25-minute fight. And then one last quick point, because you guys pretty much hit everything. in terms of when you were talking about, people keep saying that, Ngannou's made these improvements. I think it's ironic and hilarious that how that's being that's been the narrative for this fight. When what exactly were people saying before the Rosenstrike fight? They were saying the exact same thing. What did he do? He just went, fuck it. And he just went at him and just smoked him in 20 seconds. And people are like, looks like improvements were made. I don't know. It's like, what? No, he just bum rushed the guy in 20 seconds. So, I don't know. To me, the fact that, people are still, spewing this, sure, from a general perspective, I'm assuming that the guy has gotten better. He's in his game. But he's not at from where he started to how long Stipe's been fighting in terms a skill set. He's never going to fill that gap.
Did you guys did you guys know he threw a leg kick against JDS?
Did he? I remember.
I heard someone say that the other day. They're like, you didn't see the leg kicks he threw against JDS? The guy's thrown 2 leg kicks in 5 years, but
and then just last thing real quick. It's one of these weird fights, almost like Blades and Lewis in a sense where it's this is one of these quintessential fights where I just feel you can't get too wise about it. You can't cap a fight like this how you do every other fight. It's just not the same. Because of that, I want my money nowhere near this fight in any capacity. Because, even if you bet it, your guy wins, you look like a genius. But I still think when you involve yourself in these type of fights and these type of scenarios, I think it's just kind of negative EV long term, and you're kind of just throwing your money up in the air and hoping it falls back in your pocket.
Yeah. I agree. Just do the right thing and don't bet the fight and root for the guy who's good at MMA. That's the right thing to do here. One other thing, I saw Hollywood Hitters posted live Stipe. I kind of have a feeling the books are going to be on the live line, to be honest. Yeah. I think you're going to end up, if it gets out of round 1, seeing a -150 or -200 on Stipe here, even if he doesn't do.
I might even be more than that.
Yeah, so I'm not even sure how open that's going to be. Just enjoy the fight. But, yeah, guys, thanks for coming out tonight. Really appreciate it. Obviously, we have a little hiatus here for a week, and then we have a card that's going to have a lot of action. I think I've got 6 or 7 bets. I think C has 6 or 7 bets. April 10 is a fire card. I'm sure Luke will have a lot. We all have Nina Ansaroff. Go play it before that line gets steamed. Anyway, though, guys, thanks for coming out tonight. As usual, I'm John Stargarian and MMA. Find me on Twitter, MMA Fox, with Luke at SW_betting and C at CHanson10. Guys, if you like the show, please drop a like, follow, subscribe, and share the podcast. We'd really appreciate it. Thanks for coming out. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks.